Ioannis Leonardos asked, in the tabernacle and the temple, the Holy of Holies was towards the west, but in Orthodox churches, it is towards the east. What is the symbolism of that inversion? It's a great question. So when the first churches that the Christians built, once the Edict of Milan was promulgated, once Christianity became legal in the Roman Empire, the first churches that the Christians built had the Holy of Holies in the west. And so if you go to Rome today and you go to the early like Constantinian churches and the churches that were there in the very that are still standing from the very first centuries, you will notice that the Holy of Holies is in the west. And this is actually the cause of a great confusion in Catholic circles right now because the fact that the priests in Vatican II liturgy serve towards the people. One of the justifications that they used in their description was that in the early churches of Rome, the priest served towards the people. But the reason why they served towards the people is because they were serving towards the east, is because they were facing east because of course of the verse that says that that the Son of Man comes like a lightning bolt from the east to the west. And so that you know it- so that the priest was standing facing the returning Christ, right, facing Christ that was coming towards them. And that's really the way of understanding, you could say, the symbolism of the west in the tabernacle and in the temple. You can understand it as if it's the receptacle, right? So the grace of God or the light, comes from the east and then lands in the west, right? And so that's why the it's like a counterpoint, right? It's the box, right? It's the thing in which the sun goes down into, right? It's the receptacle. It's the feminine, right? So it's the west. And so that's how the first churches were done. And St. Augustine, and I think in other descriptions too, describes that the Christians, what they would do is that during the consecration, I think the consecration of the elements, the um, the entire church would turn east and would so the priest was already facing east, and then the entire church would turn east and face the east as the transformation was happening, like to receive the oncoming Christ, right? To encounter the Christ. And if you have to remember that in the vision of Ezekiel, it's described that the door that's in the east of the temple, of the third temple, is sealed, and that this seal is the door through which the Messiah will come. It's the door through which the presence of God will come. That's why it's closed and it's sealed. And so the people would turn to face the east and encounter this door that opens and that would through which the glory of God would come, right? Um and so then ultimately what ended up happening is that the Christians decided to turn the entire church the other way so that it always faced east, so that it always faced the glory of God that was coming. And then the iconography of the church starts to reflect that. So if you go to an Orthodox church, what you'll see is that in the east there's an image of of Mary, of the Mother of God, that is there as this gate, the gate in Ezekiel, the sealed gate through which the Messiah will come. So the symbolism becomes both eschatological but also incarnational kind of at the same time. That's why other churches often, instead of having the Mother of God there with the child, will have the returning Christ, right? The Christ in glory, because you could also represent it that way, which is that here's Christ that's returning, that's coming from the east and is going to also, you could say, come towards the west. But now the west is us, right? Now we're the West. We are in some ways those that receive the glory of God, right? We become, you could say, the living temples of the glory. So the symbolism of later Christian churches becomes more complete, you could say, because is able to integrate this transformation that Christ brings in the symbolism of the church. The other thing to notice, and that's very important, is that in the temple and the tabernacle, the altar is in the east, right? So the Ark of the Covenant is in the west, and the altar is in the east, in the sense that it's in the outer court, and the priest will offer up the sacrifices, of the animals in the outer court. And then you can imagine the glory of God comes down in the west. So it's like an exchange. Matthew talks about that in his book. Whereas, because in Christianity, in the book of Revelation, you see that the center of worship is the altar, right? So the center of worship becomes the place on which the lamb is placed, and it's around the altar that the procession is happening. And so there's this really interesting transformation. And then what happens in Christian symbolism is that it all kind of gets fused together, which is that we have the altar, which is also the Ark of the Covenant, and which is the place on which the glory kind of descends from above, and then gets transmitted out to us who also receive it, also being in some ways the living temples and in little arks of the covenant. And obviously this is some of this stuff is not described in the text. I'm in some way speculating from the fact that the meaning of the fact that Christians did flip the churches, and it's only in Rome that you find these early Western facing churches. So hopefully that's helpful.